Good morning and welcome to our show. Today we're going to continue our study on the church. My name is Mark Mitchell. I'm a preaching minister at Park Avenue Church of Christ. And as always, I'm joined by our sidekick, Steve Fox, who has been a minister for almost 50 years in the Kanawha Valley. He's going to assist us as we discuss these various topics about the church. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Maybe we're a little closer to solving this problem that the whole world has.
Yeah.
One day closer, maybe.
Yeah, there's some potential good news coming up for us as we move forward. And for those who's listening and curious about what the plans are, I think there'll be a meeting soon of the men who will get together and discuss procedures and things of that nature, and that will be coming soon. But yeah, hey, listen, I actually might get to get a haircut soon.
But that's after you and I come up with the vaccine, right?
No.
You said all the men were going to have a meeting, and that was something different.
Yeah, that's something
okay.
different. Yeah. We're going to just stick with. Buddy, we're barely getting by with Bible stuff. Let's not try medical stuff. At least I'm barely getting by.
I drove by a medical school one day.
Yeah, that's about
what I got.
that's about the extent of it. When I was in school, and I would see the individuals doing their biology stuff and discussing this stuff, I was like thinking to myself, "There's no way." So, I'm glad I never took that path.
My oldest grandchild just got her nursing degree, and when we would go to Nashville, I'd say, you want me to help you study? And she'd open her book, and I would read a sentence, and I might get 2 words out of that sentence. I mean, it's amazing what they have to learn and the vocabulary that they have to have for their job.
And you would think that at some point in time, they would have transposed those words from Latin to English. I mean,
Well,
what were they thinking?
I sure am impressed with those people in the medical field, and especially those people in the medical field that are doing today what they have to do.
Yeah, I get kind of aggravated. I hear people's comments about what some people are dealing with on a daily basis that today just to live a normal life, and they're complaining about it. And I've yet to hear one doctor, nurse complain about their job as far as it relates to the service that they're doing to their patients. They may be complaining about the fact they don't have enough help sometimes, but they're not complaining about the job. Kind of bothers me when we complain about the fact of what we all need to do, because we all need to be a servant to others. That's definitely an aspect of being a follower of Christ that we need to get.
And it's not just the medical field either.
No.
Last night I heard that in New York City, they've had 100 transit workers die. Die.
Wow.
Not. It's a case that they actually died. Over 100 because they're
Yeah.
run the trains and the buses and.
Yeah, you wonder what New York, or any, for that matter, large city is going to do, simply because the transit system is, it's just a gold mine of germs.
And a bunch of people in New York City have to have it because that's the only way they get around.
Yeah, they can't afford necessarily to live in New York, but they like the working in New York, and so they travel quite a distance to do that.
Well, I guess we settled that, didn't we?
Yeah, throw another log on the fire there, buddy.
Well, if we could just get you and me and some other people here from the church to go to the United Nations meetings, we'd be fine. We could go solve those things.
Yeah. Our next meeting might be through glass and bars. Well, In our discussion last week, we talked about the church, and you brought up some great concepts for us as far as understanding what we're looking for in our attitude and our focus as it relates to church. And you brought up the Messiah part of it. I was just curious what your thought is on the division that is in the churches. I'm not even speaking necessarily in the fact that all the various churches with different names on the door. I mean, we know there's divisions there, but there's even divisions among the individual groups.
Congregations.
You know, how does someone who can, in one sense, find the simplicity of what the church should be, but yet turn it into something that's so complicated that not everybody understands it and follows it?
Well, that's a tough topic, and I'm probably the wrong one to ask that question to, because in 1971 at Harding University, I was selected to be most likely to split a church. So, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. I just said that to make Mark laugh.
It worked.
It worked. I think we talked about last week, and I think the big concept here that a lot of people don't understand is to be acceptable in the sight of God does not mean that He has a list of 50 things and you have to mark an X in the box, and when you get all 50 of them right, then you're a devout Christian. Christians are at different spots, different times on their own journey, and sometimes we get feeling, well, why doesn't that guy understand that? Well, he may not understand it because he's not been a Christian very long, whereas you and I have been Christians a long time ago. I was baptized when I was 12, and I'm 70, so you can do the math. But there are people on different trails, different spots, different points on their journey, and we ought to, love those people wherever they are. They might be a baby Christian, or they might be a Christian who's been, a disciple for 70 years and hasn't put a lot of work into it, and maybe you won't be able to tell some people from the people in the world, but that's what Jesus said we have to do. So every individual Christian has a list. Your list is probably, excuse me, not probably, your list is different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And where the division comes into play is when I sit down with you and explain to you all my doctrinal biblical beliefs, some of which are very trivial, some of them are not even mentioned in the Bible, and some of them that are mentioned in the Bible are not issues of salvation.
Mm. Yes.
I heard a lady say one time the gospel was, hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, and quit smoking. Well, quit smoking is a it's a good idea. It's very admirable that you would try to quit it.
It's not salvation
But
related.
it doesn't have anything to do with the gospel. I think you mentioned last week, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says, of first importance. So there are some things in the church that are of first importance, and you and I don't have the right to change those things. Now, there are other things that are kind of optional. The Bible is not always black and white. The Bible has a lot of gray areas. So, and Paul in his epistles says, if you want to do this, fine. If you don't want to do that, that's okay too. The observance of days, eating meats offered to idols, there are all kinds of things. But the problem is when I make a list and say, you're going to follow that list.
Yeah, there's no question about it that there's a lot of people become invested in what they've come to a conclusion about, as this is what everybody needs to have, much in the same way that I've seen people get invested in their politics. People can get invested into their concepts of how you cook a turkey. I mean, you can get invested into a lot of things to where there's only one way to do it, and as my dad liked to say, it was my way or the highway. And, you know, some
And
people-
at every level,
at every level,
every topic.
every topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as followers of Christ, and as examples that Paul and even in John and gives, and even Peter, that loving one another trumps everything. Trumps everything, and that's hard.
I've talked to you about this before. I had a good I had a good running friend who was a Roman Catholic, a devout Roman Catholic. And we were running one day, and we were talking about what would you say to somebody who was just a new Christian. And I said a couple things that I thought was pretty insightful and pretty good answer. And Tom said, well, what I would tell him is love God and be nice to everybody. So that's pretty good.
I can, you know, that's a list I can work with.
That's a good list. Love God and be nice to everybody. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, since we were talking about being nice to everybody, Mark and I had discussed privately what we were going to discuss today as far as the essentials in the church. And I suggested to you last week, if you saw the program last week, that there are at least 4 things that if you were going to start a church somewhere or go plant a church somewhere where there was no, if you were along the Amazon River somewhere and you were in Brazil and you came upon a village that none of them had ever been more than 5 miles away from their home, and you wanted to set up a church right there, first of all, it'd be very difficult, but there would be some things that you would have to have that are non-negotiable. And the one we talked about last week, and I'd like to add a little more to that this week, the first thing that would be at the top of that list is a Messiah. The word means the anointed one. The word means the chosen one. So that Messiah is discussed in prophecy in the Old Testament, and then the New Testament is entirely directed at who is the Messiah. And so that's what they were teaching and preaching in the first century, that we believe this man who was raised from the dead by God is the Messiah and will be and continue to be the Messiah, the anointed one of God. Do you, I don't mean to embarrass you, but, well, yeah, I do. Did you ever have the talk with your mom and dad?
No,
Never.
no, my mom gave me a book.
Did you ever have the talk with your daughters?
No, my wife's had that.
She took care of that.
My wife took care of that.
Well, in most normal families, the parents at some time in their life, along with their children, have the talk with the kids. They sit, you know, it's time to sit down and talk to Johnny or Mary. And I often wondered, well, first of all, it makes you a little bit uncomfortable when you have this talk because you're not real sure about what mom and dad's going to say, and mom and dad's not real sure what you're going to say. But I wondered sometimes, I wonder if Mary and Joseph ever had the talk with Jesus as he grew up. And one of the things that we discussed last week was there had to become a time when he understood that he was the Messiah.
Yeah.
There was some time where Mary and Joseph had the talk with him. Now, we're not told where that is, but I can kind of make a guess about it. The information that we have about Jesus' childhood is very, very limited. But in my opinion, there's one passage that just screams, look at me, like waving a red flag. And that's what happened in Luke chapter 2 when Jesus was taken to Jerusalem by his mom and dad. They went there for the Passover. And the Passover was a huge, huge feast. Just think of the biggest crowd you've ever been in and multiply that by 5 or 6, and you've got what Passover was every year. Because they were, if you had the money and you had the time, you could do it. All the Jews in that area went to Jerusalem. Jesus, we're told by Luke that Jesus goes with his mom and dad. And before we look at the first part of the story, this ends up with somebody, most of you know who that is. This ends up with somebody saying, don't you know that I should have been about my Father's business?
Yeah.
What a beautiful, beautiful question. What a statement that just we hone in it, we put the lights on that and spotlight it with all we have, because he said to his mom and dad, did you not know I should be about my Father's business? So there's a time where I think he's starting to understand that, and when he's 12, they go to Jerusalem, and they go there for the feast, and he gets separated from his mom and dad. And I like to read this story, and it doesn't say this specifically, but I can just see him walking around as a 12-year-old trying to find his mom and dad, looking down every street, looking in every group of people, who, by the way, didn't have to stay 6 feet away from each other. But he's looking for them, and he finds himself in the temple. And after he gets in the temple, the Bible says, Luke writes, that he was there for 3 days. Now, I don't know about you, but I know what I would need in 3 days. I would need a place to sleep. I would need some food. I would need something to drink. And I would hope that I would have some kind of safety and security so nobody does anything to me. I'm 12 years old. I'm in this huge crowd. I'm separated from mom and dad, and I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea. And Joseph and Mary thought that he was with some family members, some other people, some friends that were with him. And so they take off on this journey, and then they realize that they're going to have to go back and get him. And Luke chapter 2 says that he's there, and he's in the temple, and he's talking with these people who have master's degrees and doctorate degrees in Judaism. And they are amazed at the questions he's asking and at the concepts that he has in his mind already built there and molded there by the time he's 12 years old. So he spends a lot of his time probably listening to those men and asking questions and getting answers. But I know one thing that he did. I guarantee you, there's one thing that he did. He listened to the rabbis teach, because the rabbis taught in the temple every day without exception. So if he listened to them, maybe, just maybe, he heard them talk about him.
Micah 5, verses 1 and 2. Now muster your troops, O daughter of troops. Siege is laid against us. With a rod they strike the judge of Israel on the cheek. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who's to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days.
Huh. That's what my mom told me one time. My mom told me that I was special and that I was going to be born in a special place. It's called Bethlehem. And the reason they were going to have to go to Bethlehem is because they had to pay their taxes, and they were from the tribe of David, and David was born and grew up in Bethlehem, so the Messiah was going to have to grow up there too, because there's a connection with the tribe of David. And after maybe he listened to this passage, maybe they actually talked about it, but he knew that the story of his birth was very special, and his mom had told him about that, about where he was born and how it took place, and they didn't have any room, and he ended up being born in a barn. Well, he knew that because she had talked to him about that probably on several occasions, or maybe he heard the rabbis talk about this.
From Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son.
Mom told me that story one time about having to go to Egypt. They were trying to kill all the babies in Bethlehem, where I was born. They were killing all the baby boys who were 2 years old and younger. And they were being led by this maniac king who was so super jealous of anybody that he wanted to make sure none of those kids grew up and became a king and kicked him out, so he had all those babies killed. I think there's a special place, well, never mind, I don't know. I think there's a special place in the eternal judgments of people who just kill innocent children all the time, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
What an ego problem.
Serious.
So Jesus is going, Mom told me about that. She told me about Herod, and they had to take me to Egypt because he was killing all the baby boys. And then, after a while, after we were down there in Egypt, an angel appeared to Dad and said, you can go back home now because he's dead.
Mm.
Maybe, just maybe, he heard somebody say that, one of the rabbis say this.
From Isaiah 53, verses 4 through 7. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. And all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that was led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is before its shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth.
Mark, you grew up in the country, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln County. Did you ever see an animal killed?
Yes.
I have too, but just little ones like chickens.
So, grew up with, we would raise hogs, and we would do the,
Did you ever have to kill one of the hogs?
no,
You were helping.
I was helping.
I don't know how most 12-year-old boys would react, but I guarantee you Jesus, on that occasion, during those 3 days, saw animals sacrificed. He saw lamb and goats, turtle doves. He saw all kinds of animals die, and sometimes in a very gross way. You know, they killed the lambs.
A lot of blood.
A lot of blood. They just cut their throats and let them lay down there until all the blood was out of them.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's not a part of Christianity. I would be really bad at doing that.
Yeah, me too.
But he saw that. He saw that happening those 3 days that he was there. I don't know how a 12-year-old would react to a sacrifice like that, but he knew that this passage meant that the innocent lamb was going to die, that the innocent lamb was going to shed his blood. And as he was thinking about that, there she was right there. Right there she was. Now, I know this never happened to you. Did you ever be doing something and your mom and dad be right behind you, but you didn't know they were back there?
No.
Tell the truth.
Yes.
Yes. I think we're both in that club, aren't we?
And see, many times I've had that happen.
Can you just see her face? She was so relieved. It had been 3 days since she had seen him, her only child. And it had been 3 days and she didn't know where he was. And all of a sudden she finds him. She's relieved, but she wants to kill him. Yeah. She actually wants to kill him because he did this to her and to Joseph. And so that's when she asked the question, why in the world didn't you come and get us? Why didn't you send somebody to tell us you were all right? And Jesus says, did you not know? Or should you not look first? Would you not know that I would be about my Father's business? My Father's business. He's not talking about Joseph.
No,
he's talking about the other father that he had. His birth in Bethlehem. Out of Egypt I've called my son, and this lamb who is slaughtered. I can see, and I don't have any way to prove this, but I can see very clearly Jesus looking at Mary and saying, I'm the one, aren't I? It's me, isn't it, Mom?
Yeah. My
birth in Bethlehem, my time in Egypt, a sacrifice, a perfect lamb that's going to be offered, it's me, isn't it? Would you not like to have heard that talk on the way back to Nazareth? You think they talked about anything important? Man, I think that's when they probably had the talk.
The amazing thing was the lawyers, the teachers of the law, they were all impressed. They were listening to him, and their education level was a lot further along than Joseph and Mary's. I mean, you know, they were devout, good people, but they weren't steered and raised in the law as such as these prophets were.
No.
From the tribe of Levi, I mean, that's from an early age. That's what they did.
And how are those religious leaders trying to figure out who he was? They knew the prophecies too.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a 12-year-old kid. So how in the world did this kid get this smart in the topic of religion or Judaism or theology, following God? How did that kid get that smart in 12 years? So I can see them, you know, the next week say, remember when that little kid was here last Wednesday? Remember he was talking about that? Yeah, I wonder where he is now.
Do y'all know where the pigeons are so we can send him a message? Or is there any way we can text him?
I do know that after this event in Luke chapter 2, I do know that as they walked home, his life was never the same. Nor was yours, nor was mine. No Messiah, no church. If you're going to set up a church, if you're going to start a church, you better have the Messiah at the top of your list. No Messiah, no church. And if you're going to a church that doesn't talk about the Messiah, I would suggest to you, in a kind way, but in a Christian way, that you go find a church where they talk about the Messiah all the time, because he's at the top of the list.
The concept of the Messiah is so difficult for us because, on the one hand, who this was a 12-year-old boy. The very human element of that, you and I dismiss 12-year-olds like they're... But yet, he was the Son of God, and at the same time being a 12-year-old boy. That for us is sometimes difficult, and it was a struggle for the New Testament church because they wanted to sometimes discount the humanity that Jesus had. But to understand the Messiah, you have to get the humanity part of it along with the deity part of it. You can't ignore the fact that he was flesh and blood just like we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
Yeah. That's one of the hurdles you have to jump over when you start thinking about who was he.
Yeah.
Did he really know what he was talking about, or was he just lying? Was he just conning these people, or did he really actually know who he was and what he was going to accomplish?
Which gives rise to what we talked about earlier, 1 Corinthians 15. The resurrection for us declares that everything about Jesus is true. Because without it, as Paul puts it, we'd be fools to be following someone who did what he did. You know, so yeah, it is a very difficult thing to focus our hearts and minds on the importance of Jesus. When you were asking me to read part of Isaiah 53, one of the verses that caught my mind as we were going through that, it says, and we like sheep, let's talk about me, have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. If that's not the truth of the human condition, I don't know any verse that is. Because we do have the propensity to seek out our own way as it pertains to anything and everything. You know, we talked about divisions earlier. Generally, most divisions happen because one person wants, or two people, both want their own way. And they're not seeking out the way of Jesus. Even when someone thinks and is convicted to the heart without one shred of doubt that they are right, but they're treating someone else who's maybe to that same level of conviction. I mean, we've got some hurdles to cross in our lives to make sure that we don't always seek our own way in everything that we do.
And I think that's a big part of what you talked about at the beginning, those dividing issues that in some cases aren't important at all.
No.
About 20 years ago, my roommate in college called me one night. He preached at a church in a suburb of Columbus. And he said, "Hey, I got good news for you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "The church that split off from us in 1955, we're going to merge with them and get back together with them." And I said, "Well, usually you hear it the other way around.
Yeah.
This church split and 4 people went over there, 9 people went over there." But he was calling to tell me that these 2 churches were going to merge. And I said, "Well, that's great." I said, "What brought about the merger?" And he said, 3 guys died. As long as those 3 guys were there,
It was never going to happen.
it was never going to be solved. But once those 3 guys died, both churches were saying, "Let's get back together and do this." And I guarantee you that one of the things they would have to do as 2 churches merging together is look at that list and say, what's important on this list? Is this a matter of salvation? Should we carry this out, or should we not carry it out? And like you said a little while ago, that's not easy.
No.
That's tough.
It is very difficult, and Paul lays some groundwork at several different times in his writings. One of them speaking to the fact that, just if something is, you have disagreement with one, if you're in your estimations, the more mature, just be forgiving about the whole thing, Be the wise brother.
Yep.
Most of us have had siblings, and we understand that concept. Sometimes just you gotta overlook things, and you don't have to make everything so.
When you have siblings like that, you're just practicing to be a parent.
That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
For sure.
No Messiah, no church. In the next 3 weeks, we would like to discuss other things that are primary examples of things that had to be in the church to make it a church, to make it an assembly, to make it an ecclesia. So we'll discuss God offers us a place in that kingdom. We'll discuss it if we don't have a book, you can't have a church. And if you don't have a table, you can't have a church.
Verse 20. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who believe in me through their words, that they all may be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. For me, that was always a tough understanding, a tough question for me to grapple with, in the fact that Jesus actually lays toward his the idea of people believing is laid at the unity that is placed in him. He basically is saying division will cause unbelief.
Unity of the Spirit. He doesn't say it's your obligation to make it. It's not your obligation to make that unity. It's your obligation to maintain it.
Yeah.
Because God, through his Son, through his Spirit, brought that unity into the world. And we're supposed to maintain that. I can't go out and produce that.
No.
I can't go out and say, hey, I'm important. I'm Steve. I'll stand on this corner here and make all you people united. But I can maintain that kind of unity in a church, in my home, at school, at work.
Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4 and 5 how that Jesus has reconciled us toward a peace that is now made available to us. And the peace that we desperately want is the peace that we have between us and God, much in the way he talks about there in John chapter 17 when he's praying.
And as he talks about in Isaiah 53, about
Yes.
Our sins were laid upon this sacrificial lamb.
That is-
Paul says he, God, made him to be sin who knew no sin. That's where the unity comes in.
Yes, yes. Are there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners before we close up this week's agenda?
I'd just like to suggest that what my wife's been suggesting to me, be patient, because, you're only going to have to be in the house, 100 more days or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
But of course, we're in a situation where our kids are all grown and have their own families, so we don't have anybody at the house. But these moms and dads that have to go to work and to keep their jobs and then have to have somebody to watch their kids, I don't really know what kind of anxiety that would be, but it would be tough.
And making sure that their children are doing their homework, that you're keeping up to date on all that. I also know that there are college-age students right now doing finals, and doing finals in a whole new way via the internet. My niece is doing some of those right now, and so it's difficult. And I'm sure Batson is probably doing some, and I know Peyton was doing some stuff that I talked about. So there are a lot of people dealing with circumstances is quite unique and difficult at this time.
I have two granddaughters who are both in college. One's a freshman and one's a senior, and they're taking their finals
Yeah.
over the internet. I don't know what that means, but that's what they told me.
Yeah, you're the only person I know who could leave his cell phone at the church building for 3 days and it doesn't really impact
It
your
was on the
life.
pew this morning when I got here.
I know, I saw
Yeah.
it. I was like, I can't believe you left his cell phone.
Well, I've probably never told you this, but I'm one of the 10 guys that doesn't have a computer that live in the United States. And I'm also one of the 10 guys that grew up in the 60s who remembers everything that he did.
I would almost classify you as a nerd, but because you don't
No,
have a
no,
computer,
no.
you're not a nerd.
That's not even close. My daughter always has this ongoing discussion. Is my dad a nerd or is he a geek? And they still haven't figured it out. When my oldest son was a senior in high school, he came in early one morning, like 7 o'clock, said, "Dad, can I borrow one of your shirts?" I said, "Sure, go get whatever you want." So he goes to the closet and picks out this shirt and comes back. I said, "What do you need that for?" He said, "Well, today's nerd day at school." So I was so impressed that he would come to me and ask me to help him.
You know, I can imagine, I know that you typewrite, that most of everything you have is notes that you use the typewriter for. You know that a computer is nothing more than a typewriter with a screen
Oh, I
instead
can
of
type. I can type very well.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hope you have learned a few things from Steve and I, even though we bantered back and forth a little bit with some humor. But as we continue this series on various things that come up that Steve and I would like to talk about as it relates to the world we live in, as it relates to the church that we're in, as it relates to the Messiah we want to follow and serve, I pray that you will continue to join us. We will continue doing these even after we're back meeting together. Steve and I have talked about this. I think they would be quite beneficial, not only to our members, but possibly to other people who are interested in hearing about various ideas and concepts as followers of Jesus Christ, connecting with the world that we live in today, which is kind of a mess. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. You can email me at lowercase mark.mitchell@parkavcoc.org. I will put it on the video. Or you can contact us at our parkav.org website, which will also be on the video. Again, we thank you so much for your patience, and we thank you so much for your allowing us to make the mistakes that we do, or at least I do.
Amen.
And continue to follow us on YouTube, like us, subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you, and have a blessed day.